So, right before the rather sudden announcement of Chainsaw Man's ending, I put out a video right before the release of the final chapter, attempting to predict what would happen. That was fun because chapter predictions were always an enjoyable part of the weekly reading experience. But a commonality throughout that process was never fully being able to predict what would happen with each new chapter, as Fujimoto had consistently proven to be rather unpredictable. But the tone had greatly shifted with the sudden announcement that chapter 232 was going to be the end of the manga. What, for many, myself included, was seen as fun speculation and meme material had now become a chaotic mad dash for answers. Nobody had any idea how this was going to end, as it just didn't seem like the proper time in the story to end things. Nevertheless, I did my best to decipher the implications of chapter 231, and for the most part, I think I did a pretty good job. TLDR, my main point in that video was that Pochita's intention behind eating himself and creating a world where he never existed was an attempt to help Denji change himself for the better, as being Chainsaw Man was self-destructive and stagnated his growth. And what we ended up getting was largely an exploration of that idea with some extras as well. So, the biggest and most unexpected reveal in this chapter was the return of Power, filling in for Pochita saving Denji from the zombie devil. I do find it really funny how in my previous video, I raised this very meta idea about the Blood Devil's absence from part 2 being a representation of how things can't go back to the way they were, emphasizing Denji's need to move forward and change. Only for not just the Blood Devil, but Power herself to return in all her glory. I laughed out loud because, of course, this is how she re-enters the story. But that idea of things not going back to the way they were does still hold true in this chapter. Things from the past do return, but they're different in a world without Chainsaw Man. I find the inclusion of Nayuta to be really interesting, and I saw a lot of people were confused about why specifically she appears and not Makima. We learned in part 1 that devils take on a more human-like appearance the more fond they are of humanity, which, despite her twisted morality, was the case with Makima. But she was Makima as we know her because of her deadly desire to be with Chainsaw Man. But Nayuta didn't have the same intent as Makima due to the way that Denji successfully raised her, which allowed her to develop a connection with someone in a healthy way. So it makes sense for the Control Devil to manifest this way, as there's no Chainsaw Man for her to chase after. But the absence of Chainsaw Man is obviously most important for Denji. There were a lot of ways to interpret Pochita's words in the previous chapter, but they ultimately culminated in a hard reset of the world. Not an entirely new universe, but it's honestly more like a do-over. Denji was still in debt to the Yakuza, he befriends Power, and is roped into public safety by the Control Devil. In many ways, this is still the life that Denji dreamed of. And now he's dreaming of love, being able to go to school, and even wanting a pet dog. The story, up to this point, from my perspective at least, had a heavy focus on the delicate balancing act between taking agency in your own life and being selfish. Being Chainsaw Man wasn't necessarily a corrupting force, but it enabled the damaged, trauma-inflicted aspects of Denji's character. Deep down, Denji was a good person who wanted to be a hero, but wasn't going to be able to achieve that dream without confronting his issues, and Chainsaw Man was getting in the way of that. So now, in this world without Chainsaw Man, the responsibility for his actions lies solely with Denji. There's no one manipulating him and no Pochita guiding him along. And what we see Denji do with this new direction, well, not really new since this version of Denji never knew Pochita in the first place, you get the point, is the highlight of the chapter. After having defeated a devil at a nearby school, Denji spots what he believes to be another devil attacking one of the students. Power, being Power, doesn't offer any help, of course, so Denji takes matters into his own hands to eliminate the devil. Denji dashes ahead full throttle, blood chainsaw in hand, but the intention of killing the devil quickly shifts once he sees that this pigtailed, clumsy girl is about to trip. Tossing the chainsaw aside, Denji swiftly saves Asa Mitaka from falling over, and potentially crushing Bucky, the chicken devil. It's not like Denji didn't take human life into consideration before, but more often than not, he didn't really care what happened as long as he killed whatever devil he was fighting. Denji hurt a lot of people, both directly and indirectly, and one of those people was Asa. He didn't just doom himself by asking Yoru for sex while surrounded by devils, he also doomed Asa. He had undone the promise he'd made to her after the genuinely amazing heart-to-heart they had in chapter 219. All for the vague allusion to sex from a devil that was literally trying to kill him less than 5 minutes earlier. Because by doing so, Denji isn't freeing Asa from the grips of Yoru's possession. If anything, he's seemingly further entrenched her control in their power dynamic. Yoru asserting that Asa has given her consent caused a ton of uproar in the community whenever that chapter came out. It's hard to say whether or not Yoru's lying, as Asa clearly does have feelings for Denji, but I think in this instance, Yoru is the one calling the shots. I mean, Yoru is quite literally a rapist, having violated both Denji and Asa in the past, so I don't think it's out of the question for her to violate Asa's consent again. Regardless, it was Denji's decision that caused this to happen, and he paid the price for it. But now, even without the prior knowledge of his past mistakes, this is almost like atonement, as he's not just selflessly prioritizing the life of another, but he's also finally fulfilling the promise he made to Asa by functionally saving her from reliving the events of Part 2. Given the way things played out fairly similar for Denji in the absence of Chainsaw Man, I think the same can be said for Asa. Her crushing Bucky was the catalyst for everything that happened to her in Part 2. I don't know if the War Devil would still appear to her, as Yoru was only in that position because of Chainsaw Man, but Asa's isolation and bullying would still end up getting worse, as it did before. But for as great as this moment is, it ends up being bittersweet. The relationship that Asa and Denji had developed over the course of Part 2 is now gone, not even existing as a memory. Their lives, now on two different paths, seemingly never to cross again. Maybe not though. Asa dead forever. Denji saving Asa comes at the cost of not getting to be with her, which in turn is a reflection of how his character has changed in this new world. He can't get everything he wants without having to make sacrifices, a trait that would prove to be his downfall in Part 2. In many ways, this is emblematic of the potential Denji has to evolve into the hero that he always wanted to be. He's able to show restraint and deal with the difficult reality that there are sacrifices that we need to make in our lives. This version of Denji we see here holds many of the same characteristics of his other self, but has now grown into a more realized, mature version of himself. He's quite literally wearing his scars, although they've transformed him into something more. Yes, I am lifting that line from the Batman. It's a great line. Eye patch, suit wearing Denji to me is like the ultimate form of the character. That being said, remnants of Pochita still linger within Denji. After being saved, Asa thanks Denji, addressing him as Chainsaw Man, going off of the fact that he was wielding a chainsaw. Denji's heart thumps heavily upon hearing the name, and we the reader are greeted with Pochita's content grin upon his heart. Denji tries to rationalize it, and Power, through her acute knowledge of cardiology, deduces that it must be heart thump disease. Whether or not Pochita did fully remove himself from the world, or if he did leave a little bit of himself in Denji's heart, what's evident in this instance is something that I feel in my own life. That being that you can never fully forget someone. The people that molded and shaped our experiences and character live on even well after they're gone. You hear a song or see a flower out in the woods, and it feels like that person is right there beside you, like they never left. But of course, like with this chapter, you do have to learn to move on and live without them. More than anything, Pochita was Denji's friend, who he saw as more than just a devil. Even though the life they dreamed of came to a tragic end, the impact they had on each other transcends even through time. Denji gives one final look as Asa finally gets to live the life she deserved before setting off to get some grub with his buddy, bringing the nearly 8-year run of this story to a close. Now, dear viewer, despite the seemingly positive reception that I've had towards this final chapter, there is something that I've omitted up until this point. You might be wondering, if the manga ended back in March, why am I only making a video about it now, several months later? And the answer to this question, aside from having other video ideas that have taken precedence, I just haven't thought about it. I read this chapter on release, liked a couple posts going over various thoughts and details, and that was it. I enjoyed reading it, and especially appreciated a lot of the panels, but deep down, there was something that was kind of bothering me that I couldn't quite place my finger on. It took me a little while to rationalize it after the initial release was over, but then I finally came to the conclusion that I was underwhelmed by the ending. I first read Chainsaw Man during Christmas of 2021. I remember taking a family excursion to Barnes & Noble and perusing around the manga section. Chainsaw Man was a series that, up until that point, had kind of flown under my radar, as I was definitely watching a lot more anime than reading manga at the time, but I had been hearing good things about it and seen several of the iconic panels like the Darkness Devil reveal. I took a chance on it and bought the first 2 volumes. And upon getting back home, I subsequently read both volumes that same night. To say that I fell in love with this series would be an understatement. The guts and gore were so gnarly and awesome. Denji maniacally laughing while shredding through hordes of zombies is still one of my favorite panels in the entire series. I laughed a lot as I thought the series was really funny, striking a nice balance of written and visual comedy. But more than anything, as I kept reading, I kept getting the sensation that this series just got me. It understood me. It was around this time that I was experiencing a lot of personal turmoil. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship that didn't end on the best terms. Various friends had moved away, and some family had even passed on. And the dynamics of my own life had drastically begun to change, as well as I was, and still am, trying to navigate adulthood. I had a proclivity to shut myself away during these bouts of depression. I would just want to disappear into various escapist games and movies, etc. But when I started Chainsaw Man, I didn't feel like I was escaping from anything. I felt like I was being seen. You can't have the good in life without the bad, and choosing to be complacent is only going to make the bad that much worse. You shouldn't resign yourself to an ignorant perception of normality. You should strive to do something with your life. It doesn't have to be something crazy like being an astronaut or anything like that, but there are things in life that we're meant for. Things we're good at, things we can offer to other people, and I came to the realization that in my instance, isolating myself wasn't going to change the negative ways I was feeling. It was only going to make them worse. Chainsaw Man had entered the pantheon of art that changed my life. It may sound silly to say that the manga about the guy with a chainsaw sticking out of his head wanting to touch boobs was life-changing, but I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't mean it. And my love for the series extended into the release of Part 2. I found Asa to be a wonderfully written and interesting character. I, to my knowledge, have never been a teenage girl and thus don't have the perspective on the unique trials and tribulations that are associated with it. But I had seen a lot of women fans of the series express their delight in how Fujimoto had been able to depict a lot of uniquely feminine struggles through Asa. But as Part 2 progressed over the years, there was some amount of discontent that grew within the fanbase. As time went on, Asa progressively got sidelined from her role as the protagonist. And as for Denji, even though I enjoyed the internal struggle of him trying to get everything he wanted in life, it did admittedly become repetitive. A lot of the same type of scenarios would play out over and over again, with the same outcome of Denji not learning from his mistakes. I understand the point is that Chainsaw Man is causing Denji to stagnate, but that kind of just became all it was about. Plus, a lot of side characters that were introduced were either barely developed or exited the series as quickly as they were introduced. I really feel this way mostly about Famine Devil / Death Devil. The overarching conflict for Part 2 kind of centers around her, and it kind of didn't matter in the end. I know a lot of people felt that way about the fake Chainsaw Man, but I feel like he served his purpose as an envoy for the Fire Devil. Now, Part 1 was no stranger to quickly killing off side characters, but the difference was that Part 1 was considerably shorter than Part 2. Many of the plot threads, like the Death Devil prophecy and fake Chainsaw Man, were set up very early on in the run of Part 2, which in turn was several years ago. So there was a lot of time for speculation and theorizing, and I think a big part of a lot of people's disappointment stems from how much larger the scope of Part 2 was. There were so many more moving parts, characters, and concepts that it honestly seems like it ended up just becoming too much for Fujimoto. I genuinely believe that he just got burnt out on the series and wanted to be done with it. Because if you think about where the story was right before chapter 231, it really felt so jarring to suddenly have to contend with, oh, now the story's gonna be over. Denji and Yoru are battling to the death with Asa and the rest of the world's life on the line, and then poof, That's it. I said in my previous video that I liked what Chapter 231 was going for, but in a vacuum. As in, on its own, I really like it, but it doesn't work in the grand scheme of things. It really feels like there was just so much more to do in the story that has now been cut short. Kishibe or Rezi never came back for some reason. Quan Chi and Katana Man were kind of just forgotten about. Yoshida kind of just dies. And Asa didn't really get a proper resolution to her story, which is especially frustrating because she was the protagonist for a significant portion of the story. And if it is the case that Fujimoto was genuinely burnt out, that's totally fine. It's his story and he's free to do with it as he pleases, but that doesn't change the fact that it reflects on the quality of the work. It's just very odd because the final 2 chapters are good, but I feel like they're preceded by something else entirely. I mean, this is it. No part 3, no misadventures of Paui and Denji. This is where the story that began all the way back in 2018 ends, and it's left me wanting more. Not more in the sense of milking it dry with spin-offs or unnecessarily keeping it going, but wanting more from an ending that has left me unsatisfied. And don't get me wrong, this is by no means a horrifically bad ending or anything like that. I saw a lot of people comparing it to like the Attack on Titan ending, which is not even remotely close. There are no fundamental flaws or blatant retcons. It's just underwhelming. It's not all doom and gloom though. This is a series that has had a significant impact on not just my life, but thousands of others as well. This was a journey that we spent years together on, expressing those feelings through fan art, analysis, and videos like this. And now it's something that we all have to come to terms with being over. It's just as bittersweet as the ending itself is for Denji. Like with any other experience in life, things don't go the way we think they will, and the only choice we have is how we react to it. And despite my dissatisfaction with how things turned out, I'm immensely grateful for everything that came before it, and I always will be. There is a lot to look forward to though if you're a fan of the series. The anime adaptation of the International Assassins arc was officially revealed to be coming out sometime next year. A new mobile game was announced with this awesome animated cutscene. Even if it is the most egregious gacha slop imaginable, I will be checking it out because, I mean, it's more Chainsaw Man. Plus, if you haven't already, there's this really cool fan-made manga covering what happened to Rezi during the events of Part 2 that I highly recommend you check out. What I'm getting at is, despite the divisive and disappointed feelings people had towards the ending, there is still so much passion and engagement being had with the series that I don't see going away anytime soon. Especially the Rezi movie. I mean, that came out last year and I'm still seeing edits of it all the time. And who knows, maybe with time my perspective on the ending will change, and even if it doesn't, like I said before, I'll always love and cherish this series for the impact it had on me, both the good and the bad.